Hey everyone. So, this is a kind of a new thing that I'm starting. I don't know what it is going to become, but right now I'm thinking of this as a series of episodes about fantasy, about writing fantasy, and also maybe thinking about fantasy, especially from an Indian point of view. Because a lot of fantasy that we are exposed to on a regular basis is Western in nature. And though I am a huge fan of fantasy, no matter where it comes from, I do want to make a distinction between the kind of fantasy that is, in essence, Indian and the kind of fantasy that is thought to be the default flavor of fantasy, but does not necessarily correspond to what the essence of Indian fantasy might be. I don't know if there is an essence of Indian fantasy, and I'm just wondering out aloud if there is one. So, this series of episodes is going to be about fantasy. The main reason I'm doing this is because I am presently engaged in the task of writing a fantasy novel. And though I will not be discussing it in great detail, I think, although that plan might change, it is something I am engaged in doing right now. Like I'm waking up at 5 every morning and writing 1,000 words before 7. Then I'm spending the day world building and I'm doing a lot of things related to it. So, this might also be a way to record my thoughts as I do this. So, as I record this, Rings of Power is a series that is on Amazon Prime Video. It is a Lord of the Rings series, or rather, a story based in the Lord of the Rings universe created by J.R.R. Tolkien. And I have so far only watched 2 episodes, and I thought they were nice. But this is not a review of the episode or the series. It's something that struck me when I was watching it. And it had to do with like this bunch of elves enter a dark space and it is very cold. And one of them remarks that this place is so evil that our flames are not giving off any warmth. So, cold is associated with evil and warmth is associated with good. Now, think about it. Why is this? Perhaps it is because in Europe, people are freezing their asses off. And when the sun comes out and there is a little bit of warmth or heat, they feel good. So, warmth becomes the equivalent of good, and cold becomes the equivalent of evil. You will see it in many places. You will see that even when there is talk of ghosts being present at a location, there is mention of it suddenly getting cold because cold is bad and hot is good. And fantasy, specifically English language fantasy written by Western or European authors, is full of mentions of winters. Winter is, if you have seen Game of Thrones, there was an entire thing about winter. Winter is coming. And the winter that was coming was supposed to be very bad because winter is a time when the crops will not grow because it's very cold and people have to, live indoors because if they go out, they might freeze to death. And all of that is understandable. European history, after all, is shaped by climate conditions prevailing in Europe at that time, or even now. It's the West is generally a colder place, but we don't have a winter problem per se. It's not a long lasting thing. It comes, it is bad in some places of India, but it's not a culture defining thing in any significant way. What we do have is summers and monsoons. And summers are often terrible. Crops don't grow, people die of heat stroke, and the land is parched. So when the rains come, they're often seen as a gift from the gods. Compare and contrast this with the perception of rain as something that is sad. In India, often, I'm not saying this applies universally, I'm just presenting an alternate way of looking at things. In India, rain isn't a bad thing, unless you're living in Mumbai, in which case, hi, Atlantis. In India, rain is not necessarily a bad thing. In India, rain is something that brings hope and joy after a long period of dryness and heat. So, while Western fantasy has themes like winter and wolves. We have monsoons and elephants. And I think this is an important distinction to make because the words we use to describe how we are feeling are often informed by the conditions under which we live. And the conditions under which we live are often foundations upon which our literature is based. So, in a Lord of the Rings universe or a Westeros universe, winter might be a terrible thing that signifies death and evil. In India, that will probably be the task of something that is that is analogous to heat and summer. By the way, summer is a great thing over in the West. The sun has come out. They all talk about it. They talk about the weather, and the sun coming out is a great thing. If you're living in England where it rains all the time, I suppose that's what I'm told. I've never been there. Uh, the sun coming out is a great and pleasant thing. People go out and they enjoy themselves. At the peak of the Indian summer, if you go out, you may very well be courting death because every year we have people dying of heat stroke. And even in older times, the summer was never a good thing. It was perhaps at best an uncomfortable thing and at worst a terrible thing which caused people to die. Another thing that I watched recently was a conversation among fantasy authors, and one person remarked that a thing that takes them out of the story is anachronistic language. Whereas they will be reading a fantasy novel, a high fantasy novel with knights and dragons and medieval settings, and someone will say, okay. And it takes them out of the setting because okay is not a word that came into existence in medieval times. It essentially stands for all correct and it has a complicated history, but that's not what I'm going into. I'm saying the word okay is a more contemporary word than any of the words that were spoken in medieval times by knights and dukes and kings, etc. So they said that use of words that did not exist in medieval times takes them out of the story. Now let's think about this. Why does that happen? It happens because they have a conception of why they everyone has a conception of high fantasy as being somewhat medieval in nature. There are armors and dragons and swords and dukes and castles and magic, etc. But the thing that we often lose sight of is that all of these things are kind of arbitrary, aren't they? Because dragons did not actually exist in medieval times. And magic has never actually existed. Even today, it does not exist. So, what they are essentially advocating for is a tradition of fantasy writing which has to do with, fantasy has been written that way till now. So, in their minds, it has acquired it has become that kind of a setting has become the definition of fantasy. And therefore, when they see something in a fantasy novel that appears to them non medieval, they are pulled out of the story. Now, a lot of Indian fantasy is also going to be written in English because India is, after all, an English speaking country thanks to our colonial history. So, even though Indian writers and European American writers are both writing in English, English is the destination that we have all arrived at, we have taken very different roads to get to this destination. Their journey to English has been through their native cultures. Their journey to English has been through the fact that they speak English at home, the fact that they have always spoken English. The shape that Indian English has taken does not have to do with that heritage. Our heritage of English speaking or English writing comes from our colonial past. And our English is often informed by words and ways of speaking that are direct or indirect inspirations from Indian languages. So it is not uncommon to find words from Marathi, Bengali, Punjabi, Odia, Tamil, etc. in our English. So what I'm trying to say is that the kind of I wonder if this is too strong a word, but the kind of puritanical attachment to a medieval European setting as far as fantasy is concerned, as far as high fantasy is concerned, maybe a limiting influence on Indian writers who are trying to learn how to write fantasy or trying to learn how to deal with fantasy by taking advice from Western commentators, critics, or even authors, or even publishers or editors. Because our fantasy almost necessarily is going to be different from the fantasy that is defined as high fantasy over in the West. So, yeah, those were some of the very rough thoughts that I had about writing fantasy from an Indian perspective. And I hope that this is going to become a series of some sort as I progress more and more into my own fantasy novel. Let me know what you thought of this down in the comments and like and share this video. Thank you.